Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading over to Venus, Earth's sister planet, but it's always been a bit mysterious. And forget thinking it's geologically dead. There's actually some pretty compelling new evidence suggesting, well, significant tectonic activity happening right now, shaping its surface.
That's absolutely right. For a long time, the standard idea was that Venus was pretty much stagnant, unlike Earth with our very active plate tectonics. But some really groundbreaking analysis, looking back at old data from NASA's Magellan mission, that started way back in 1989. Well, it's changing that picture quite dramatically. This research, it was published in Science Advances, and astrobiology.com picked up on it too. It just shows, how valuable it is to revisit old data with the kind of analytical tools we have today.
Okay, yeah, let's definitely unpack this. Our goal for this deep dive is to really get a handle on the evidence for this ongoing activity on Venus. We're going to zoom in on these surface features they call corona and explore what they're telling us about what's going on deep inside the planet. And for you listening, maybe you're really into space science, or perhaps you're prepping for the UPSC exam and need the latest on planetary geology, or maybe just fascinated by space science. We're going to try and make these findings super clear, really engaging, give you some solid insights without, drowning in jargon.
Right. So let's start by picturing these corona. Imagine these huge sort of circular shapes on Venus's surface. They can be anywhere from tens to hundreds of kilometers across, really vast. And the prevailing scientific idea, the theory, has been that they form over these plumes of really hot material rising up from Venus's mantle. Think of it like a big column of heat welling up from deep inside. And this pushes up against the planet's lithosphere, that's its outer shell, the crust, and the very top part of the mantle.
Ah, okay. So it's like this pressure building up from underneath, creating these massive structures. And you said sort of circular, they aren't perfect circles then. I think I read they're often more oval-shaped with fractures.
Exactly. They typically do have this oval shape, yeah, and they often come with these patterns of fractures, sort of like concentric rings around them. And we know of hundreds of them scattered across Venus. But what's really new, what's innovative about this latest research is the way they studied them. They didn't just look at the surface, the topography, the highs and lows.
They went deeper, looked beneath the surface, you could say.
Precisely. They combined that surface map data with gravity data, very detailed gravity data. All thanks to Magellan, which gave us, really, the best data set of that kind we've ever had for Venus. Now, this is key. Gravity measurements can show you things surface views can't. Tiny little variations in gravity across the planet can signal differences in what's underneath the density, the temperature. So those hotter, less dense mantle plumes we talked about, they'd have a slightly weaker gravitational pull.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. So putting those two data types together, the shape and the gravity, what did they actually find?
Well, they looked closely at 75 specific coronae, and out of those 75, a really significant number, 52, showed strong evidence of this buoyant, hot mantle stuff directly underneath them. And that's powerful evidence suggesting that the processes shaping these things aren't just ancient history. They seem to be actively warping Venus's surface today.
52 out of 75. That's most of them. And the connection the lead author, Gail Cassioli, made to Earth's early days is pretty mind-bending. He said, coronae are not found on Earth today. However, they may have existed when our planet was young and before plate tectonics had been established. So Venus might be like a snapshot of early Earth, a window into our own past. Does that mean Venus just sort of went down a different evolutionary road than Earth? Why did Earth get plates and Venus got this?
That's a really big question, isn't it? It really drives home that planetary evolution isn't just one path. We're still figuring out the exact reasons why they diverged. But this research, it suggests Venus might be in a state similar to Earth billions of years ago, a time when these mantle plumes were maybe the main drivers of surface geology before our global plate tectonic system really got going. And this study, it does more than just say coronae are active. It also looks into the different kinds of tectonic activity that might be happening there.
Okay, right. Let's get into those. We know Venus doesn't have Earth-style plate tectonics, these huge plates sliding around. So what kind of geological action are they proposing for Venus?
Well, one really interesting idea is a sort of unique type of subduction happening around the edges of some coronae. It's not like on Earth where whole plates dive under each other for thousands of kilometers. On Venus, it seems more localized. As that mantle plume pushes up and the corona spreads out, the edges sort of bump into the surrounding crust. And instead of a huge plate boundary, you get this more contained zone where surface material gets pushed back down into the mantle.
So kind of a regional recycling of the crust, driven by these plumes, not global plates.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Then there's something called lithospheric dripping. Just imagine a chunk of Venus's lithosphere, that outer shell, becoming cooler and denser than the hot mantle underneath it. Over geological time, this denser blob can basically just detach and sink downwards, like a heavy drop falling through lighter liquid.
Like a cold, heavy bit of plaster falling from the ceiling into the warmer room below. Yeah, I can picture that. Do specific coronae show signs of this dripping more than others?
It's possible. The different shapes and features of the corona, how fractured they are, if they have deep trenches around them, associated volcanoes. These might be clues. For example, coronae with deep troughs around the edges could suggest material being pulled downwards by this dripping process. And finally, they also looked at simple plume-driven volcanism. This is maybe more straightforward. A mantle plume sits under a thicker bit of the lithosphere, and it generates enough heat and pressure to melt rock, causing volcanic eruptions right above it.
So the planet has different tricks up its sleeve for releasing heat, depending on the local geology, basically. I remember seeing some illustrations in the Science Advances paper. They showed examples like Artemis Corona and diagrams of these processes. Really helps visualize it.
Oh, absolutely. Visuals are key for understanding these immense forces. And all this, it just adds to the picture of Venus being much more dynamic than we used to think. Maybe more like how Earth was very early on. Remember, we've seen other hints from Magellan data before suggesting pretty recent volcanic flows on places like Mons.
And looking ahead, this makes the future of Venus exploration incredibly relevant, doesn't it? Because the lead author, Gail Cassioli, and one of the co-authors, Erwan Mazarico, they're both involved with NASA's next big Venus mission, Veritas.
That's right. Veritas, it's aiming to give us super high-resolution data on Venus's surface and what's going on inside. Launch is planned for no earlier than 2031, I believe. And what's really exciting, connecting back to these corona findings, is that Veritas will have instruments to measure gravity in much more detail than Magellan could. Given how vital those gravity measurements were for figuring out these corona are active, well, the data from Veritas could be absolutely revolutionary for understanding Venus. And another co-author, Anna Gulcher, she put it really well. She said, the most exciting thing is that we can now say there are most likely various and ongoing active processes driving their formation. And she added, we believe these same processes may have occurred early in Earth's history.
It just perfectly highlights how powerful it is when you combine different data sets, right? The surface shape, the gravity. It unlocks secrets about the inside.
Exactly. It's textbook planetary science in action. You revisit old data with new eyes, make discoveries, and then you plan future missions like Veritas to build on that knowledge. It's how we piece together the story of planetary evolution.
So wrapping this up then, the big takeaway is Venus, no Earth-like plate tectonics, sure, but it's definitely not dead. It seems to be a tectonically active world. And these amazing features, the coronae, are the smoking gun, showing us ongoing geological action deep inside. And potentially they're giving us clues about how our own Earth worked way back in its infancy.
Definitely. And thinking about these different ways a planet can be geologically active beyond just plate tectonics, it opens up fascinating possibilities for comparative planetology. You start wondering about all those exoplanets we're finding. Could some of them have active coronae like Venus, maybe instead of plates, or even alongside them? It really forces us to think beyond just Earth when we define what makes a planet active.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening, especially if you're aiming for the UPSC Civil Services exam, this kind of deep dive is super relevant. Understanding planetary science, geological processes on other worlds, comparing planets, it's all core stuff for both prelims and mains. This research is a brilliant case study. And really for everyone, isn't it just amazing? It speaks to that basic human curiosity, wanting to explore our neighbors in the solar system and figure out how these worlds came to be.
It really is. Every little discovery about Venus or Mars or anywhere else helps us understand the bigger picture of how rocky planets form and evolve, including our own. It's a grand puzzle.
So if you found this journey into Venus's surprising geology as fascinating as we did, please do hit that like button, subscribe to the deep dive for more explorations like this one. And definitely leave us a comment, any questions, thoughts, we'd love to hear them. If you want to dig even deeper into the original research, check out the details over at astrobiology.com. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.